Welcome to the Deep Dive. This week, we're reflecting on a message that I think really shifted our perspective.
Definitely it did.
It was a powerful meditation on the story God is writing through us. And it felt like more than just a sermon. It was, a real invitation to re-examine how we measure our lives.
It was incredibly moving. And I think that's because it tackled this common tension that we all feel but maybe don't talk about enough.
What tension is that?
Well, we live in a world that it universally applauds size, right? And visibility and quantitative results. But the message just immediately challenged that whole default setting.
Right.
It drew a really clear line between those worldly metrics and, the qualitative internal measurements of spiritual health, of actual growth.
Okay, so let's unpack that core tension.
Yeah.
The source material kicked off with the scenario that is just so relatable. That moment you run into an acquaintance and their immediate, well-meaning question is almost always about metrics.
Exactly. As the pastor shared with us, the typical question is always, so has the number of church members increased?
Or is the building bigger?
What are the big accomplishments? Yeah. And it forces us to confront this idea we have that bigger numbers must equal spiritual success.
And this is where that profound alternative came in. The questions that the pastor wished he could hear. I mean, the questions he was really urging us to start asking ourselves every day.
Right.
They just completely ignore that organizational scale.
They turn the focus inward, away from the institution and onto the soul and its actions. So instead of asking about size, he was encouraging us to ask, has your faith grown well?
Has the labor of love increased? That one really stuck with me.
Has the practice of the word become richer in your life? Has your hope and trust in the Lord become stronger?
That is such a challenging pivot because, we can easily tick off visible accomplishments, but assessing whether my hope has strengthened, that requires some deep, honest self-reflection.
And that reflection is the entire point, because the insight that was shared was just so clear. God does not remember massive ministries or beautiful buildings or all the public accomplishments the world applauds. He doesn't grade on a curve, and he certainly doesn't grade on scale.
So if God isn't looking at our quantitative scorecard, what does he actually value? We were given some very specific metrics, pulling straight from the early church.
Yeah, from 1 Thessalonians and Colossians.
Yeah.
You have to remember the context here. Paul is writing to these young, often persecuted communities.
Right. Their success wasn't about donations or size.
Not at all. It was about enduring commitment. So from Thessalonians, we get these three things: works produced by faith, labor prompted by love, and endurance inspired by hope in Christ alone.
Let's talk about that phrase, labor prompted by love. It's beautiful, but what does it mean practically? Like if I clean a room, that's a work. But if I do it with a heart surrendered to Christ,
then it becomes a labor prompted by love. That is precisely the distinction. It's not about how visible the action is. It's the internal fuel.
Okay.
It means doing the difficult, unseen work. Visiting the sick person no one else calls, praying for that difficult neighbor.
Serving when you're tired.
Exactly. Simply because of your love for God and others. It's the effort that comes from a place of genuine, self-sacrificial affection.
And Colossians adds another layer to that, reminding us the goal is living a life worthy of his will, which includes bearing fruit and being strengthened to endure with joy. I love that addition of joy to endurance.
It's so important. It emphasizes that faithfulness isn't just, gritting your teeth and pushing through. It's finding spiritual strength in the struggle, which then shows up as joy.
And this is what God remembers.
This is the quality God remembers, the quiet, daily commitment to these things.
There's such a liberation in that, isn't there? If the goal is just to pour our hearts into the very things God remembers, those small, unseen labors of love, it just takes all the pressure off.
It does.
That faithfulness, even if no one else sees it, is what's infinitely precious in his sight.
And, focusing on that provides the perfect segue into the second major theme from the message. Because that kind of faithfulness, it's almost impossible to sustain it alone.
Right. It leads us directly to what was called the miracle of our intersection.
Yes.
And this is where the message just shifted into this moment of real wonder, asking us to just stop and consider the sheer statistical improbability of us all being together in this place at this time.
It truly brought home the idea of divine providence. I mean, think about it. There are billions of people in the world, Statistically, the number of people whose names you remember, who you share life with, who truly know your joys and sorrows.
Your genuine intersection.
It's shockingly small. Maybe a few dozen people, 100 max over a lifetime.
And yet here we are, sharing this community. The sermon just walked through the massive, impossible alignment required for that to happen.
Alignment of birth years, the cities we grew up in, the critical choices that led us down one path and not another.
And crucially, that shared spiritual longing that drew us all to this one specific place.
And that alignment is not a coincidence. The pastor was so clear that this intertwining of lives is a miracle. It's the unmistakable providence of God. It makes you realize your presence here isn't just accidental seating.
And this isn't just a nice idea. The source material grounds this intentionality right in Scripture.
Which is vital.
You hear it in Psalm 139, where David says that all the days ordained for us were written in God's book before even one of them came to be.
And then there's Acts 17.26, which anchors it in geography and time. It says, God marked out our appointed times in history and the precise boundaries of our dwelling places.
So he chose not only when, but where we would seek him.
Exactly. And Ephesians confirms this, reminding us we were chosen and predestined according to the plan of him who works everything out.
That just paints this stunning, almost overwhelming picture. We are people standing together at the intersection of a vast, deliberate miracle.
A miracle. And the analogy of weaving from Psalm 139 is just so powerful here.
Yes, tell us about that.
Well, the Hebrew word that's used for our creation in that psalm, it literally means to knit together or to stitch.
Wow.
And that just transforms how you see your own history and our community's history. It means every small detail, every decision, every joy, every unexpected tear has been woven with this delicate intention and care by God's hand. He's the master weaver.
What's so interesting about that is how we tend to relegate God's activity to the past, you know? We say, God led me here 5 years ago, or God did that great thing for me back then. We kind of box him into history.
That was such a critical moment of realization in the message. It stressed that God's weaving did not stop the moment we arrived.
He's still at work.
God is forever the God of today. He continues to lay his hand on our time right now. He holds the thread of our lives, even now. That frustration you felt this week, that unexplainable grace you received, that is evidence that his hands are still moving.
And I think that truth is what gives us such confidence. If he's the one holding the thread, then it calls for a deep practical application, placing life fully in his hands.
Absolutely. Trusting completely. It means embracing the past and the future without regret or fear. We're encouraged to be bold, to be confident, not in our own strength, but because we know who's designing the pattern of our lives.
When you realize the master weaver is holding the thread, your fear of tomorrow it shrinks.
It really does. And that reliance on the master weaver brings us directly to our third theme, how this interwoven life actually fulfills the deepest desire and the ultimate prayer of Jesus.
The goal of the weaving is unity.
Precisely. We move to John 17, where Jesus is praying for unity, and not just for the 12 disciples.
No, for all who would believe through their message.
Which includes everyone in our community today, everyone who upholds and shares life deeply.
I found the framing of that prayer so challenging. He didn't pray for our buildings or our ministries. He prayed that we would be one, just as he and the Father are one.
And what's fascinating is the definition of unity that the message presented. It's not just, being friendly or avoiding conflict.
No.
Unity is revealed in the struggle. Every moment we choose to understand, to forgive, to uphold each other, even when there's conflict or real disappointment, that action is part of the conscious weaving that fulfills Jesus' prayer.
And the stakes are so high. Jesus says in John 17.23, when they are brought to complete unity, then the world will know. So our unity isn't just for us, it's an external witness.
It is the ultimate apologetic. The power of unity is shown in those hard places, in moments where forgiveness feels undeserved or service requires a real sacrifice. That's when our lives, holding on to one another, become this living, visible proof of God's presence to the world.
Which means our faith can never be just a private piety. We aren't just passive receivers of grace.
No, we become responsible for actively lifting and sustaining and building one another up.
And that happens in the messiness of real life, rejoicing together, weeping together.
Bearing one another's burdens. The pastor reflected on the journey this community has shared. The differences, the hurts, the trials.
And the powerful reassurance was that none of those difficult moments were just human accidents. They were the very hand of God knitting us together, making the prayer of Jesus visible.
Right before our eyes.
The gravity of that shared, messy, sustained journey is just. It's profound.
And it all culminates in this fresh, actionable commitment. If God's plan, the fulfillment of Jesus' own prayer, depends on my love, my service, my sacrifice, then pursuing unity becomes a non-negotiable choice.
A choice we make together, which leads perfectly into the final identity-shaping truth from the message. It comes from Ephesians 2:2. We are God's workmanship.
Now, that word workmanship is one of those words you just have to dig into. The original Greek is poema,
which is the root of our English word, poem.
Exactly. And that gives this whole concept a completely new dimension.
It really does.
The revelation shared with us is that God doesn't see the church as just an assembly or an organization. We are living literature. We are a poem being actively written inside the grand eternal story of redemption.
We are his ongoing masterpiece.
Yes.
That's a staggering realization. A masterpiece isn't passive. And what's so crucial is the reminder that God's poem never ends with a period in our lifetime. The story continues every day.
Through our actions, through our faith, through the direction of our hearts. And if we're living literature, that shifts the entire focus onto our daily choices.
Right.
Every single day, we're required to write a new sentence in that poem. That's the practical application.
It puts an immediate spiritual weight on every single interaction. If the story is ongoing, we have to constantly be asking, what sentence am I going to write today? The stakes for our micro decisions become incredibly high.
Because if you don't love in a moment of difficulty, the rhythm of the poem breaks. A line gets erased.
If you hold back and don't serve when there's a need, God's story for that situation is left unfinished.
And if you don't forgive, the beauty and the power of unity are hidden from the world.
So we are each essential. A letter, a line, a whole paragraph. If you pull back your commitment, the poem is incomplete. The narrative falters. It's your love, your service, your prayers that allow God's beautiful story to continue.
We're all called to be someone who consciously chooses to write a sentence of faith every single day.
Wow. So this deep dive, it's really shown us that our existence together isn't a statistical accident. It is a miracle woven thread by the providence of God. And we're called to be the visible answer to Jesus' prayer for unity, to focus not on the size of our success, but on the depth and quality of our faithfulness.
And that's the mission we've been entrusted with, to recognize the profound miracle of our intersection and to carry forward God's living story, living as a community that is truly the church, his ongoing daily poema.
So what does this all mean for you today? It means your smallest decisions, your most internal commitments, the sentences you choose to write. They are the visible evidence of God's grace and hand actively at work in the world.
The pastor asked us all to make a clear decision. I will love, I will serve, I will pray, and I will continue God's story. So how does committing to writing that single sentence today ensure that the rest of your life shines as God's living church? A church that doesn't just receive light, but actively brings light and flavor to the world around it.